So today we are going to make a flat-sided cup, an 8-sided flat-sided cup. I do most of this flattening on the wheel. And what I really love about these cups is that it's both round on the inside, but flat, has the 8 flat sides on the outside. And if you look at the bottoms, there's a round foot also surrounded by the flat sides. So today we're going to show you how to throw these, and I'm going to show you how to trim these all in one shot. Let's just get to it. So when we look at, you're gonna need your regular pottery tools when you do this, plus a few extra things to make this possible. Probably the most important thing is you're gonna need one of these, which is a cheese cutter, and this cheese cutter has an adjustable depth wheel thing where if I loosen this screw here, I can change the depth of how much I can cut. So I can loosen the screw, change the depth with this roller between the roller and the wire. And this wire needs to be pretty tight here. So that's tool number one. Tool number two is you're going to need something that's like right angle, that has a right angle but angle thing. So I use this one a lot because it has a right angle, but you can also use something like this to have a right angle on them too. So this is just a right angle rib. This is a metal right angle rib, so I use those for this. And the other thing that you may want, this is optional, and I'll talk to you about it when we get there, is you're going to need something like this here. And I'll show you what I use this for when we get there. And this is optional. All right, so let's throw some faceted cups, or cups that have 8 sides. So when I start this, I always start with I usually throw these with 1.5 pounds of clay. So the way how I would normally throw a cup, usually that this size, is I would throw it with about 1 pound of clay, but these cups need to be thicker, so I have stuff to trim off the outside to make the flat side. So I start with a little bit more. I start with 1.5 pounds of clay. Now you may need to start with more or less depending on what sort of cup you're making, how big, how wide, how tall, right? So here, slap that baby down, and then we'll start centering. So we're centering here. There we go. So, oh, that centered really fast. That's really nice, right? That's always good when you get that clay centered like super quick. I love it. So let's bring that down a little. So that's pretty centered. So now I know that I'm going to make a cup. But the thing I now need to keep in mind is I want to keep this cup just a little bit thicker than normal because I need to cut some clay off to make that side. So resist the urge to make it thin, tall, beautiful, like we've been taught in school and like everyone has taught us, make the thinnest, lightest, most beautiful thing. You must battle your inner instinct as a potter and as a thrower, and you have to leave this cylinder thick. So that also means that I'm going to probably start with this mound, this initial thrown mound, a little bit taller than I would normally, right? So this initial width right here decides how wide my cylinder is going to be. So I'm going to leave this a little bit taller and about the same width that I would normally make my cups with. I'm just not going to go wide. So here we go. So I'm just going to actually push that back in, just push that back in just a smidge. So now I'm going to open my cup, right? Just like I would normal. So I go down, 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 open, 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 open. There we go. And so I'm going to check my depth because that's super important here to check my depth. So get my needle tool out, stabby, stabby, check my depth. So that's a little deep for me. So I'm just going to go down just a smidge more and open. Okay, so always at the beginning of the day, I always do my depth check till I kind of get myself all straightened out and I know that I'm doing really well. If you have any comments, feel free to ask questions or comments in the chat box there thing. So here I'm ready to raise. So once again, my goal when I'm raising is I'm going to make sure that my cup has straight, even sides. So I don't want any part of this cylinder that I'm starting to make right now to be any thicker or thinner than any other part. So let's take a peek inside to see how it looks, right? So you see that that wall is even from top to bottom. That is super important to establish that now. If it wasn't even from top to bottom, Like if, for example, if it's thicker down at the bottom, I would want to thin that out more this next raise. I want to take care of that early so that it's even thickness from top to bottom. Okay, so right there it looks pretty even. Maybe it's just a touch thicker. When I'm feeling it, it just feels a touch thicker at the bottom. So here, let's see here. We're gonna go back to there. So now I'm gonna try to raise up, just do another raise. So I'm gonna try to make the whole thing now just a little bit, my cylinder just a little bit thinner. But once again, I'm trying to keep it from going super thin, right? I'm just trying to thin it out a little bit at a time because my instinct is always to make it thin, 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 thin. But I have to battle that inner voice, that tendency that I've always been trying to do to make thinner, taller, badder, faster, and all that. So I'm trying to battle that urge. So once again, I made the whole thing a little bit thinner. And you see how careful I'm being in keeping the cylinder going straight up and down. So, yes. So, oh, someone just asked me if I had a sample of a finished product. There it is. There's a sample one right there. And we'll show you that again here again. So we're creating a pot that has 8 flat sides on it. So I'm throwing it again and making it a little bit taller. I'm taking it easy. I almost went too thin there. I almost went a little bit crazy and almost went too thin because it's just my instinct, right? Because every other pot I make, I'm really trying to jam that baby, trying to make it thin. So that's always in the forefront of my mind. Let's take a peek inside just to make sure I'm still doing a good job, right? So that's looking pretty good. So you see that cylinder looks straight up and down, going up and down, really happy and everything. So here, let's go for it again. So we're going to raise it one more time. So if we think about this, how thick is this? Let's just explain like the science of the cylinder, thickness, thinness, how much more height I can get out of this, right? So let's say I want to be super aggressive with this next raise and make the cylinder like half as thin, right? I could actually then probably make it twice as tall. But I don't want to do that. I just need to make it just a little bit thinner and it'll get a lot taller. And that's maybe what I want. For this cup, I want to make this cylinder just a little bit, I just want to make this cylinder a little bit taller so that the height to width ratio for the cup that I want to make looks good. For me, that proportion is really important. How wide is it this way? How tall is it this way? Because once I finish throwing the cylinder and start working on it, I can't make it any taller. Right? I could always trim the rim down and make it shorter, but usually I want it right at the height. So right now, when I'm thinking about this, right, and after I trim my foot on there and everything, you see that that's about how high the cylinder will look after I do my trimming. So that cup just doesn't look tall enough for how wide it is for me. Right? It's up to you to decide how your cup is going to look. But whenever you're working in pottery, always thinking about the end in mind, even what glaze you want to use on it. But for me right now, I'm just thinking about when I trim it, how is it going to look? And I have to account for the amount of clay I'm going to lose when I trim. So I'm already doing that. So it may look fine before I draw that line on there, but when I draw that line on there and take that part away, the cup doesn't look tall enough anymore. So I'm going to throw it a little higher. Just thin it out a little bit more. So here we go. I'm going to dig down underneath here, push that part in. So, but I don't need to squeeze too hard. I can take it easy when I do this part. Okay. There we go. So not squeezing hardly at all. And you can see that I'm getting some height out of it, right? There. Oh, that's right. I feel it. That's feeling it. I'm feeling it right there. Like that is for me, the kind of getting in the sweet spot for height to width ratio. So remember, always think about what you want in the end. I always have a plan when I'm sitting down at the wheel. I know what I want to make when I wedge my clay, when I measure out my ball. So remember this, I started with 1.5 pounds of clay to make this cup. All right, so now this is my cylinder. I'm going to go inside and mop up all the water really quick. Inside we go. So I know people are going to ask, how thick is my cylinder? So I'm going to get my ruler out and let's measure how thick it is. This is about 1/2 inch, a little bit under 1/2 inch thick, right? How tall is my cylinder? Some people are going to ask that. So let's just measure that too. So that's about 4 inches tall. Okay. So this is with a 1.5 pounds, and I'm leaving thickness there. Okay. So I clean out the inside. Let's scrape. So the next part is I'm going to scrape the inside and outside clay smooth. So I have my 2 ribs here, and I'm just going to scrape up and down the inside and outside. There we go. There we go. There we go. There. So now I've scraped the inside and outside. Do it one more time because a very famous potter named Don Wrights, I went to a workshop of his, and he said, and the words have always lived with me, that he wanted to make the first mark. He would make these giant pots, and then he would erase all the throwing lines off the side and make it a perfectly smooth surface. Because he said, as the artist, he wanted to make the first pot. So I have ever since then, I've been like, okay, I get it. So that is my blank canvas there. Okay. So the thing, remember I had this, we talked about this tool. This is where you need to use this tool. So I'm going to take my little guy here and undercut this, because this little part coming out here is going to interfere with the way how I use this tool. So I'm going to undercut this just a little bit right now to get rid of that part. Okay. That goes away. That comes back, goes to be, lives another day to be another pot. So now why do I need this? Well, what I want is, for me, I like these pots to be straight up and down cylinder. So let's just look at my sample pot again. See, it's nice straight up and down cylinder, has these straight sides, it's beautiful. So what I like to do is, I found it works best for me if I make sure that this cylinder is going straight up and down. And I could use that and I could figure that out by using this. And I just kind of push it up against the side to see if it's straight, right? There's a little bit of a gap right there, but let's go around and check another spot. Once again, a little bit of gap down here. So very small. You guys probably can't see it, but I can see it. So what I can do is I can just push that area out down here just a little bit so it flares out. And then let's try it again. Let's see. It looks really good. Let's try again. If you're not having a hard time getting that straight, sometimes I just take this wheel as it's spinning, and I'll just mash this against the side as it's spinning to kind of rib that into place, right? So see how it's kind of touching all the way around? That's perfect. So I'm good. So I was doing that the whole time, though. As I was throwing, I was just trying to make sure that that cylinder was straight up and down the whole time. All right, so now let's get out a sponge. Let's fix this rim up. I want to round this rim up a little bit, because now we are ready to introduce the cheese cutting tool. This is super important, and let's talk a little bit about what's going on here, right? So just for review, this is a cheese cutting tool, right? It has a wire, but what's important for me that makes this cheese tool, a little cutter tool, a little bit special, it has a roller, right? And it has an adjustable depth here, right? So it has a screw here, which I actually had to replace with a much better screw. And then I can undo that screw and change the depth, the roller, the distance the roller is from the wire, because this is how much clay I'm going to cut off, right? You can freeform this, right, without the wire, without the ruler, but it's much harder, because as you're going down, you'll have a tendency to go deeper and shallower, and you won't get an easy, good cut. With the roller there, I can never cut off more clay than that depth there. And for this pot, I'm going to be pretty close to that depth is what I need. So that's what's important here. And through trial and error, you just got to make some, figure out how much depth you need for the width of pot that you're making, right? For here, if I make this pot bigger around in diameter, I need to increase this distance here, okay? If I make the pot smaller, I can decrease this distance here, because it just doesn't take as much clay, right? As it doesn't need to take off as big a bite. But so let's just test it. There's a way we can test it to see if this is going to work. So let's test it out. So by looking here, I can take this wire and just stick it on the rim and just roll it back and forth. So you see that cut there? That's like my pretend cut right there. You see that? So I just took this and rolled it back and forth. That's about how much a bite of clay that guy is going to take out of there. Let's get that focus. Trying to focus on my back. And then what I do is I just spin it, and I'll do that again, except I'll have this side line up with that side there. You'll see? So I just roll it back and forth. So you see how I make sure that they cross just a little bit right there. That's how big the next bite of clay is going to be. I'll swing it around a little bit more, and I'll do it like that. Right, that's how big the next bite's going to be. The next facet, that's how big the next one's going to be. Let's see here. This is how big the next one's going to be. This is how big the next one's going to be. And you'll see that it's going to work out pretty good, right? Why is that? It's just because I have practiced this a lot. I mean, I love making these cups. There will be weeks where I just make 100 of these all at once. So you guys can't, it's my camera's having a hard time focusing on that little bit, but trust me, it's all working out there. You can see it all the way around. So I already know, now that I've done my practice marking, I know that that's going to work, okay? So I know that this step, so if that wasn't working or didn't line up or didn't come around, then I know I would be in trouble and that's not going to work. So let's see how many sides I have actually. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Ooh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Ooh, I have 7 sides. So instead of making an 8-sided cup, we're just going to go for the 7-sided cup. Let's just do it, which is a little bit out of the ordinary. We're just going to go for it. So here I'm going to stick the tool way down there like that. And it doesn't matter where these cuts were. So let's just erase these cuts. I mean the cut lines, because I know it's going to work out now. And oh, you could also see, I forgot to tell you that if this cylinder is the same thickness as this rim all the way down, when I make the cut, you see that? I got plenty of thickness there between the edge of the cut, and I won't cut through my wall. You see that? So I'm in good shape there too. All right, so just on the fly decision, rather than doing 7, I'm going to do 8, because the 8 is what I was going to show you, what I'm prepared to show you today. So here, what I'm going to do here is I stick this guy down here. So that's the reason, another reason why I need to have that undercut, because I like that wire being able to sneak under there to start the cut cleanly, okay? So if you didn't undercut it enough, if that wire can't get in there cleanly like that, then I would undercut it some more before I start it. But it looks like it's going to be okay. So we'll try to put this in a good position so you guys could see the action, right? So there. All right, so here we go. So now we're just going to hold this, and the roller is going to keep me from cutting too deep. The roller is going to ride along the outside of the clay here and keep me from cutting too deep and help to keep the cut super consistent. So here we go. Up we go. This is magic time. There, so I cut that piece off. Woohoo! Look at that. Look how beautiful a cut that makes. This side flopping up happens a lot just because that clay is super wet. So now what I do is I'll go 180 to the exact opposite face of this one. So I'll spin that around until that face is opposite side. So I'm going to cut the opposite side of what I just cut. So here we go. I'm going to cut the opposite side and go up here. That. Up. So now I've just cut that first side. So that's a good sign. If you're going to cut a hole through your pot, if your walls weren't thick enough, this would be the time, right? You would have probably cut through already. So here, let's do it one more time. So here, let's change the angle just a little bit so you get more of an overhead view for this one. So now that I cut this side and I cut the opposite side, I'm going to cut the 90-degree side. So here and then that opposite side. Here we go. Yeah, comes up. So then I just spin it around and I do that again. There. So now I have cut 4 sides, right? And you can stop there. You just will have 2 sides that are kind of rounded, right? But I like going all the way. So this is a round face here. Flat face, round face, flat face, round face. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and cut all the round faces off. So for example, here's a round face. So this face is a little big, right? When I look at it, it's a little big. So if you need to cut off more clay, like a wider bite than maybe what your depth, you can just push in a little bit harder with the cutter tool and it'll cut a wider flat spot. So that's what I'm going to do here is I'll try to cut a slightly wider flat spot when I do this one. There we go. So you can tell I was a little nervous with that one. Ooh, that was good, right? There we go. Look at it, that side. So now that side looks complete. So now I'll just swing around to this side. So this side is much shorter, and that's just part of the deal, right? You're hand making these, so you're not going to end up with all perfect sides. And I feel that's part of the beauty of the whole thing, right? So then I'll cut right here, go up. There we go. And then one more. So these require some skill. So usually my first couple of the day aren't too good. Just like any time you're throwing, it takes a little bit, a few times to kind of get into the rhythm. So there's my flat-sided, 8-sided cup. So let's talk about prepping, right, and getting it ready. So this rim always looks a little mangled, right? So I'm just going to take a wet sponge, and I usually would use a chamois, but my chamois decided to escape and go for a vacation, so I can't find it. So I'm just going to use my sponge there. And you see how that sponge action cleans up that rim pretty good. There's a little bit of, always like a little bit of waveriness with the rim. There's a little bit of overhang. You could decide to leave all that as just part of the process and all that. But so this is done for now, but I have some leather hard ones, right? Don't go away. We have some leather hard ones for us to trim and talk about how we finish. So let's put this one aside. So here are some leather hard ones that I made a couple days ago, right? So that we could do, because I'd love it if we could just do the whole process all in one shot, not save the trimming to another day. So these are leather hard. So these are exactly like that other one, leather hard. So let's talk about a few things now that I would do. Like, so I have two finished cups here, and you'll notice that they're finished in slightly different ways. This cup here, I left all natural, meaning that you see that these cut lines are a little wobbly and not straight, and there's some funny lines here in the center. I kind of like that. So for this one, I left that one like this. You see that? Now, for some of you, ooh, that may not be what you want. Like, I want clean marine. I want it to look like I'm in control. I got this, right? So if you're like that kind of person, you could do like what I did here. And although I did cut this while I was on the wheel, I spent some time cleaning these edges up to make them look more tidy, okay? So let's do a tidy one. Let's just do how do we make this look more tidy? And that's where Mr. Sureform comes into play, right? So this is, I think, like a 6-inch Sureform here, and it's like a cheese grater, and we'll cut the stuff. Someone said my chamois is probably in my reclaim. Probably right. I have to go through all of that. I hate that. One time I thought I lost my wedding ring in the reclaim. That was a fun experience, panicky digging around. All right, so here we I could just use this guy and just trim this down like that. And I will just scrape this down to tighten up these lines, to make these lines tighter, more precise. Like, I can make these look like they've been extruded, right? You can get those octagonal extrusion things, right? Where you can just extrude a cylinder like this. And you know, so I don't know. So look at how tight that line is now, just from doing that just a little bit compared to that line there. So I think there's more feeling in this line for me personally, like more warmth. But there's also something to say about this rigid line, because that rigid line, I think, there's more play with the roundness and all this. So it all depends on you, how you're going to fire it, what you want to do with it, right? So I'm not going to go around and finish this one by carving this one all the way around, but let's talk about trimming the bottom. But you guys get the idea. I do that, and I would just scrape this edge down with a metal rib here, which I don't have. Usually, let's use the edge of this ruler would work. So here I would just scrape the edge of this down just to smooth out those Sureform lines. And then you can see that there's a nice, beautiful turn there that's really good. So this tool right here is what we call a Sureform. It's a Stanley Sureform. They sell it at the hardware store. It's like a cheese grater, and you can find it in the hardware store by the chisels, the Sureform tool. Okay, so let's go back to trimming. Let's trim up this guy here. How do we trim this? Well, you got to be brave, because when you trim this, it's going to be like want to bounce you around a little bit. So let me clean this wheel off a second. All right, so I'm going to center this. And so sometimes you just got to best center this to here. So you just got to center this like this. So the Stanley Sureform is a lot like a cheese grater, but it's designed for like construction materials, right? So that they use it to grind on drywall and wood and stuff. There we go. So there. So I'm going to tap center this. So it's not quite tap centered. I'll keep going here. So now it's tap centered. And then I'll get out my clay here, hold it down. Ooh, this clay got a little stiff. Well, we'll try and see how it goes. So here we go. Break this up into 3 blobs here. And put this down like that. So when I put these down, I always put it down over a corner like that, right? I try not to put it down just on a flat side. It has a tendency to try to jump away. So whenever I put these guys blobs down, I always do a wrap around one of the corners here like that. That just keeps it from trying to fly away off the wheel. Now we're almost ready. Sorry, this clay's a little bit stiff. Okay. There we go. It's down. All right, so now we got to start trimming this. So there'll be a foot in here and all that, but usually when I start trimming, I will use the Sureform. I'll start with the Sureform here. I'll start with the Sureform because there are parts of this clay that are sticking out further. This clay is going in, so when I trim, it wants to go boom, 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 boom when I trim. So that's really hard to deal with just a straight trimming tool. So I start with a Sureform because it's a little bit more resistant to the bumping. And you can see here that the clay is coming out. Ooh, isn't that fun? Look at that clay coming in there, right? So you can see how it's starting to trim, but you see how there's more clay where the points are. So there's a tendency, if you just use a regular trimming tool, that each time one of those points comes around, it'll bounce you away. So the Sureform resists that bouncing more, allows you to trim a better round at the beginning to establish your roundness here. There we go. I also like trimming down onto these a little bit. So let's take a look. You see that by trimming down onto these points, I'm able to create this arc here. You see that? So where it's shallow and then this is arcing down. So just to show you that, let me trim down more on one of these points and it'll force these arcs down. So when I do that, I'm just gonna roll this trimming tool down here. Rather than trimming at that angle, I'm gonna try to trim more so I catch more of these points going around. You'll see that it creates a bigger arc. I love the arc. You see how that arc is starting to grow? I love that whoop. And that just comes naturally, right, from the process. So that's why I like that. So here we go. Sure, trim, 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 trim. So the Sureform just allows me to take away a lot of material quickly and evenly, right? And without too much effort. So now I have to start establishing my foot. That's about as far as I'm willing to go with a Sureform, right? Because it can't dig into this like it would for the foot. So now I'm going to use one of my square Dolan tools that I absolutely love. And I'm going to just start trimming the outside of the foot here. There we go. So you see here, because I knocked those corners down, I don't have to worry about those corners bumping me away because I've trimmed all this round. I only have to worry about the corners creating bumpiness until I got into this area, and I'm a long ways away from that. So that's why we always I start with a Sureform. I trim that out. So that gives me a chance to start establishing my foot. Ooh, I am getting bumpiness though. There we go. So here my foot's starting to get established, and I love this part, right? Because I'm starting to establish round versus this octagonal. I love that, the way how they play off each other. So here, it's very important to me that I have a good, nice, round foot here. But as you make these, right, you have to think about what are your priorities now, right? How do you want to make this? Just making these, right, you'll discover something about yourself. So when you see me trimming this, right, you'll see that the trimming tool is now starting to bounce a little. But that's okay. I'll come back with the Sureform and clean up that bounciness here in a second. There we go. There we go. There. So you see how that's such a beautiful, the way that transitions. So for me, transitions are really important, and how this edge ends and how this flat side begins is really important to me, right? And so you may decide to do something completely different here, right? But that's my priority. So because this has been a little bit bouncy, I'm gonna come back just for a second and trim this outside edge just a little bit with this guy here, just to kind of remove the bounciness, the waviness that's there. I can feel it. It's probably hard to see on camera. So that, trim that back to flat. And then I think for me, the foot isn't deep enough. So I'm gonna just carve that foot just a little bit deeper. right there. Oh, that's a nice size foot. There we go. That's more like it, right? I just wasn't happy with that foot there. All right, so you see how that has a nice vertical surface. Now I'm going to trim the inside of the foot. I don't really like trimming the inside of the foot with those big Dolan tools. I like this little guy for this, just to start at least. Sorry, my camera's like bouncing around a lot today. There we go. So keep going. So I have a long ways to go, right? I trimmed down here quite a bit, so I know I probably want to get down to at least there. I want the inside of this foot and the outside of the foot to match up, but I don't want to be too aggressive when I trim this. But because this is a cup, cups don't want to stay in one place, right? They want to jump out, so I can't be too aggressive. Like if this were a bowl, I could really trim on it hard because a bowl is really wide and beautiful, has a wide rim, so it has a lower center of gravity. This is all in all, this is pretty tall, so I got to take it easy here. So there. So this foot's a little wide, so I'm going to trim this down a little. So if you notice I'm lefty, I trim lefty. So I'm actually holding the tool lefty, and that's the way I usually trim. So for those of you that are lefty, this is the way I work, right? So I hold it lefty, and I steady myself with my right hand, like this. Trim, trim, trim. There we go. So these tools are really good. Let's back you off a little so you get a more aerial view of what's going on. Trim, trim, trim. So I'm almost done. I'm starting to get close in the neighborhood at least. There we go. So now I'm looking to see if this curve here matches up with this curve here. Does this come in and match up here? Okay. And so this part's just a little high still. So I'm going to come back and try to trim this part down just a little bit more. There we go. A little bit more. Establish the inside. There we go. There. So now I'm there. I feel like the foot is there. It's looking pretty good. So all I have to do now maybe is just come back around and make sure I finish cleaning up just a little. I might have missed a spot or two. I'm going to trim this, make sure that is nice and vertical, kind of fitting. I like this just straight vertical foot that kind of jives with the verticalness of the side of the pot, right? And then I'm going to round this foot, right? So it's kind of, yeah, so it's kind of rounded. There we go. So I just round that baby off. So what am I doing there? I love rounded foots because they're stronger, they're less prone to chipping, and what I like to leave on all my pots usually is this line right here. You see how I left that line where the vertical side meets the foot? That's my waxing line or my glazing line right there. So when I wax to that line, or if I want to glaze, I glaze down to there, right? This part right here, right? And I leave this bottom part of facing part unglazed right here, and then I start my glaze here again for the inside of my foot. Boy, it's having a rough deal today. So there's still just a little bit more cleanup I need to do here, and I'll be done. So a little bit more cleanup. There we go. So just cleaning it up, making sure it looks good. So I think I'm done. Just one last overall inspection. So sometimes the foot isn't exactly centered in the pot. That's fine, right? That's part of the process. But look at that. See, so I got exactly what I wanted, right? I have these 8 sides going around, contrasted by this round foot. I just love that. And then I have this part, right? How this part comes down. Sometimes I'm more aggressive and I'll trim down into this area even more to create more of this chevron U shape. I don't know what you would call that. This kind of U shape here. There we go. That's a cup right there. All done. Feel free if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll answer you, try to answer any questions for you. There you go. Inside looks good. So there's a little bit of cleanup I still need to do on the rim, that sort of stuff. But anyway, I hope you guys want to make some of these. Give it a shot. It is lots of fun.